All right, for time purposes, why don't we go ahead and get things started, Christine? For those of you who are new to joining us, I wanted to just give a brief introduction of Christine. She's going to be presenting our workshop today. Dr. Christine Keisinger is Vice President of Development and Lead Trainer of Conscious Communications and Emotional Intelligence for Studio B. In addition to helping to create our signature series, Christine creates and delivers advanced professional enhancement courses in the areas of interpersonal communication, conflict management, innovative leadership, and group and team dynamics, as well as stress management. She's also developed the course that she's presenting today. We also have another teacher who is on the call with us today, and her name is Michelle Smith. And Michelle is going to be joining in to move forward with the Navient team alongside Christine and helping to facilitate these workshops and trainings. So we just wanted to bring Michelle in today so her face could be seen in the group. Welcome, Michelle. Michelle Smith has been a Studio B mindfulness instructor since March of 2020. She's also a program manager of an outpatient cancer and home integrative medicine program for Geisinger Health System in Danville. So we're going to welcome Michelle today. And if anybody has any questions during the workshop today, please feel free to chat into me. And I'll hand it over to Christine now. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, Navient. It's so great to be back again. Yes, this is your hour. So if there are any questions, and if you're listening, if there's anything that you feel that you want a little more information on, please feel free to reach out to me or Gretchen even afterwards if you're mulling over something, if you heard something that really resonated, because I really want to be available for you as we move into yet another kind of strange period of time in this whole journey. So many of us over the course of the last 6 months have really felt the stress of it all. Here's what I think is really interesting. This is what I've been hearing, and it's been my experience as well. So 6 months ago, when COVID hit, we had to scramble really, really quickly, try to figure things out in the midst of so much uncertainty. And so many of us have found our groove. You might feel this way, that you sort of have come into a certain routine, and you may have had moments where you thought, you know what, I'm actually doing this. I'm figuring this out. And yet, why is it 6 months later, I might be feeling worse than I did 6 months ago? And on top of that, I've got to start thinking about the possibility of navigating my return to work. What state am I going to be in when I show up in the workplace? And again, as Gretchen alluded to, many of us might be having the same kinds of questions if we've got children at home. And we're sort of helping them to make that transition, whether it's transition back into school, at home, or at their actual location. So there's a reason why many of our stress symptoms might be really, really elevated right now. And it has everything to do with what is known as our surge capacity. And here's how it works. When a crisis hits, or we are confronted with a difficult challenge, we have, thank goodness, a surge capacity, meaning we have the physical, mental, and the emotional fortitude to manage whatever it is. Think about it. You did this. 6 months ago, the unknown came into your universe and turned it upside down, and you're still here. So you figured it out. You did what you needed to do physically, mentally, and emotionally because you had surge capacity. But here's what we know about surge capacity. It's limited. It has to be replenished. We can't keep dipping into it, hoping that it's going to replenish automatically. What's different about the crisis we face now that we have been facing. And I can speak for myself. All other crisis situations that I've experienced in my lifetime, what's different about this is that there's no end point that we're aware of. And we don't quite know what's around the next bend. And that can be incredibly jarring for us. And yet we keep going, and our surge capacity is depleting, depleting, depleting. And we have to proactively replenish it. We have to replenish it, and we have to get serious about it now. Now is the time. Because the only thing right now that I can be certain of, like you, is that there is more uncertainty ahead. So if you feel like you're kind of running on empty, I want you to bring yourself back to that term, surge capacity, and ask yourself, where am I? If you think about it as a gas tank, as your fuel, as what keeps you on the road, keeps you in the game, keeps you in your life, keeps you at your work. Where are you? Are you running on empty? And if you are, it's not only okay, it's completely natural and normal. If you've not heard the term surge capacity before, I promise you, you're going to start seeing it in the media and even on social media, because it's where so many of us are at. So I want to spend today's session offering you 5 different strategies that you can call upon immediately that's going to help you to replenish your surge capacity, and that's going to help you to prepare to take those steps necessary to bring you into your workplace environment, if that's in your near future, in ways where you feel like you're really well resourced, where you feel like your tank is moderately full, so that you have the capacity that you need to continue to walk the path forward, physically, mentally, and emotionally. So we're going to look at something called the art of reframing. We're also going to look at the prioritization of self-care, the absolute necessity for you to seek clarity on all fronts, the importance of social support, it's never mattered more, and the reminder to meet your stress very mindfully with a high level of self-awareness and in a really gentle manner. The last thing that we need right now is to be upset with ourselves because we're feeling stressed. It's normal, it's natural, and hopefully today's session will allow you to pull upon some of these tools so that you can continue putting one foot in front of the other. Moving into, this is one of the reasons I like this slide, there's the pathway we're walking on right now. It's really lit up in terms of where I stand. I can see, but I don't know what's ahead. I don't know if the light continues ahead. And that can be really alarming, unnerving. So what is the story you tell yourself about where you are and where you're going? This is where we get into this tool, the art of reframing. Because your story matters. How you're thinking about unprecedented crisis, challenge, change, unprecedented levels of stress, how you're thinking about, how you're talking about these things really matters. This is one of the reasons that I've titled today's presentation, Are we going back or are we moving forward? Because we get to make a choice. I think so many of us are getting clarity about the fact that we're not going back. We're not going back to the way it was. I'm not going back to who I was. I'm certainly not going back to the workplace I left. So what would it mean and how would it feel if I were to start telling myself, yeah, you're not going back, but you're moving forward and into something new, something different. I want you to start minding your mind, because reframing is an act of being very mindful of how you're thinking about what's happening and taking responsibility for your own mindset. I want to show you something and give you a very brief tutorial in what's called growth mindset. There's growth mindset and there's fixed mindset, and most of us live in fixed mindset for a reason, but that's another webinar. But I want you to think about how you've been thinking about this crisis we've all been traversing. And just listen and try this on and let me know if this feels good for you, different, better. Failure, crisis, challenge is really an opportunity for me to grow. I might not like what's happening right now, but wow, think about the ways that you've grown over the course of the last 6 months, the things you've accomplished, the way you've reorganized your life and your family and your relationships and how you do your work. Applaud yourself for that. We have come a long way. And you know what I learned? That I can do anything. I can learn to do anything. Before COVID, the last thing I could ever imagine myself doing is this, teaching virtually. But I hit the ground running. I jumped right in. I had to have growth mindset or I wouldn't have a job. And I adopted growth mindset intentionally. I can learn how to do this. The challenges that I face only help me to grow, only make me better at what I do, only push me further along the path. The effort that I put in and the attitude that I take toward whatever it is I'm doing determines my abilities. So I might have inborn gifts and skills and abilities, but my effort and my attitude also matters exponentially. This is a big one. I am really inspired by the success of the people around me. I'm inspired by the ways that people around me have been handling this. I am inspired by, not depressed by, not deterred by, not sabotaged by the way in which others have been moving forward. I'm inspired by their optimism, their hope, and I'm also inspired by their willingness to say, I'm really having a hard time. I'm inspired by their vulnerability, their authenticity. I'm inspired by their willingness to admit that, yeah, for the most part, I'm hopeful and optimistic, but wow, I certainly have my moments where I struggle. That inspires me. It doesn't deter me. And I enjoy trying new things. I don't dread it. I don't walk away from it. I don't fight it. I don't freeze when confronted with trying something new. This is growth mindset. Again, if you've got children at home, listen to how they're talking about their struggles and challenges and ask them, are they operating out of a growth mindset? Or the default, our default is fixed mindset. That's another webinar. That's where most of us live. We really have to train ourselves up into growth mindset. But the first step in that is knowing that it exists in the first place. We use very small capacity of our own brains. And we have the potential always in every moment to start growing and expanding through our own brain. So tend to the way that you're thinking about all of this stuff. How are you seeing this crisis? How have you been talking about it? Are you approaching it from the perspective of the growth mindset? Think about the path. I might not know what's around the next bend. I might not know how far the light extends. But what if going forward means there's a lot of possibility and potential? What if moving forward means again, I might not like it, but I think I could get a little bit excited about this and acknowledge that this is really uncomfortable. What if moving forward means, you know what, there's been a lot of changes that I've wanted to make personally, relationally, and professionally, and by God, I'm going to make those changes now, or begin implementing steps toward making those changes. Are there ways in which you have wanted to make changes to who you are, to how you work, to how you relate, and even changes within your organization if you're in leadership or management? Many companies have had to do this very thing. Let us not lament what was. We've got to put our orientation toward what we are becoming in the face of this crisis that carries an uncertainty that's not going away. So this is what it means to reframe. So whenever you're stuck, whenever you're challenged, it doesn't matter what the issue is, pause and say, okay, Christine told me about the reframe. What do I do first? The first thing I do is I ask, how am I thinking about this? Am I adopting that growth mindset? How can I think about this differently? And how can I think about this in a way that moves me forward as opposed to keeping me stuck or keeps me wrapped up in thinking about what was, but is likely not going to be again? Just Monday, I was teaching a similar webinar, slightly different content. And when we were having a discussion at the end, one of the participants shared that she was listening to the webinar in her office, and it was her very first day back in her workplace. And she talked about the morning meeting with all of her colleagues who had gathered together after 6 months of working remotely. And she said the stress in the room was palpable. It was palpable. There was a lot of fear about arriving back into the workplace. And there was so much exhaustion because that surge capacity has been depleted and diminished. And so just the introduction of the notion surge capacity was really helpful to this participant, because as a leader in her organization, now she has a sense of how her employees have showed up to that first day and what needs to happen to make this transition easier. So reframing is really helpful. Getting clear, what mindset do I want to bring to my return? And to think about the return as a movement forward and into something new and different. Strategy number 2, and this might sound trite, but I am so deeply serious about this, is making your well-being your top priority. Surge capacity, depleted, diminished. Self-care and stress management has always been important, but it is critically important now. We've navigated the shock of it all. And now everything we put on the back burner because we had to function is starting to come up. So you might notice, wow, I am physically exhausted beyond anything I've ever experienced before. I don't feel like my mind is clear. I'm having trouble remembering things. Things are falling through the cracks, dropping off of my schedule. I'm messing up. Emotional highs and lows. People are reporting that their anxiety is actually higher right now, and that their blues are bluer. Their depressive states and phases are a little bit darker. Or that I'm feeling great, and by 12 o'clock I feel very different, that it's erratic, emotionally erratic. We might be noticing relational friction, high levels of irritability, agitation, frustration with our loved ones, high levels of reactivity, or just a need to disengage. this really strong need to create lots of space, withdrawing. If people in your life or colleagues are starting to withdraw, that's part of this. And then, of course, professional challenges. I like to refer to these as the 3 E's. My energy is depleted for my work. I don't feel as engaged in my work or with others. And both of these things, when compromised, can impact our ability to be effective. So step 1 in making yourself a priority is acknowledging how you're feeling and expressing it, saying it out loud, even if it's just to one person. I am so tired, I can't think straight. My emotions are high and low and all over the place. Wow, I want to apologize for being so highly irritable or easily triggered in our relationship, which I really love and value. I just want to name it. And I want to name that I'm not my personal best right now professionally. That's step 1 in taking better care of yourself. But I want you to consider the following things, because these are tangible touchstones that you can very easily think about to get a quick assessment of your own well-being. What's my sleep like? Best practice right now, 6 to 8 hours. Am I feeding myself right now in a way that's actually fueling me forward? Am I making good choices that are keeping me in the game in a way that's alert, right? I know that there are certain foods that I really need to stay away from right now as much as I want them, because they're going to stress my system and I don't need any more stress. One of the things that we know about hydration is it's critical to the survival of the body, but it is critical to the functioning of the human brain. Please get very, very serious about hydrating with water to keep your brain clear and sharp and decisive, so that you feel confident in having full access to the brain that you need to forge forward. Be careful about media consumption, and I mean all media. If you're noticing that the news has you frazzled, if you're noticing that you're watching too many Netflix series and it's draining you and you're getting to bed much later than you want to and you're waking up and you're not as fresh and alert as you'd like to be very careful about this. We're really enjoying our time in binge series, and we're enjoying our time online, and we're enjoying our time taking in all kinds of information right now, but we might be on overload. Unplug regularly and be savvy. Start to think about, what does consuming this piece of media, this book, this reading, this series, Netflix series, does it nourish me, energize me, or is it taking from my system? We don't need anything else depleting us. We want to rebuild our surge capacity. Please put your close relationships on the front burner. My mantra is tend, protect, prioritize. Tend, protect, prioritize your closest bonds right now. We need each other. Give them the attention that they need. Make time for play and ease. At least 10 to 20 minutes a day, whatever that means for you. You have my permission. Give yourself permission to do something that engages you in a way that feels easeful and playful. And as often as possible, even if it's in 30-second interludes, quiet yourself. I want to take us through a brief quieting practice right now that you can feel you can use at any time. You can use this as a longer quieting practice. You can use it in 30 seconds. I've been implementing this practice between my Zoom commitments. So maybe I'll spend 3 minutes in this. Maybe I'll spend 20 minutes in this. Maybe it's 30 seconds. right? But this is a very simple mindfulness check-in. We're going to check in on 4 elements of who you are: the body, the mind, your emotional self, and your intuitive self. So wherever you are, I just want to invite you to settle a little bit. If you're driving or if you're not in a place, just listen. You can derive the benefits simply from listening. But if you're able to sit, I'd like for you to sit very comfortably. And I want to invite you to close your eyes. It's always an invitation. Or you can keep your eyes open with a soft gaze forward and slightly down. And I want you to take a very deep breath in. This might be the deepest breath you've taken all day. And as you exhale, just lengthen out that exhalation so it's slightly longer than your inhale. And again, take a very deep breath in. And as you exhale, lengthening that exhalation. And one more time, deep breath in and exhale. And now just allow the breath to be very natural, just as it is. And just remember that when we lengthen our exhalations, we settle the system. And for the next few moments, I just want you to drop down into your own body and just notice how your body feels. Maybe taking your inner awareness and scanning around the body and just noticing how you feel in your physical body. And I want you to ask the body, what do you need? Let whatever arises arise. Don't search for the answer. Maybe it's more sleep. Maybe it's more water. Maybe it's to unplug. What does this body need? And I'd like for you now to take your awareness all the way up into your mind, as if you're moving up into that brain of yours. And just checking in with the brain, checking in with the mind. See what's going on in there. And asking your own mind, what do you need? Let whatever arises, arise. And maybe it's, I need to stop worrying. I need to stop thinking so much about the things that scare me. I need the stimulation of some play or games. What does this mind need? And now taking your awareness to this very intangible place that's part of us, and that is your emotional self. And spending a little bit of time there and just checking in with, how am I feeling emotionally? If I had to answer that question, how do I feel? What would arise? And then asking, what does my emotional self need? Maybe I need to do this more. Maybe I need to talk to my partner about how irritated I've felt. Maybe I need to make amends. Maybe I need to be kinder to myself. And then finally checking in with that other intangible part of who you are. That is your intuition, the wisest part of who you are. Just sort of checking in with your intuition and asking the same question. What do I need to be more connected to this voice of wisdom? What kind of encouragement do I need to follow my intuition? And then very gently guiding your awareness back to your breath. Taking a deep breath in. Maybe exhaling with a sigh, allowing the shoulders to drop and the jaw to relax. Just noticing how you feel now compared to how you felt when we began. And whenever you're ready, just open your eyes and just allow the light and the room to come to you. Don't reach out for it. Allow it to come into you. So this is a version of something called the quadrinity check, right? It's the quad. It's 4 aspects of who we are: my body, my mind, my emotional self, and my intuition. You can drop into a quadrinity check anytime. You can be standing in line at the grocery store, and if you're feeling really stressed, drop into the body, travel up into your mind, connect to how you're feeling and to your intuition. And you'll notice pretty quickly that you'll shift out of that anxious state. It's really a beautiful way to ground and balance. And again, these are touchstones, important touchstones of who we are: the body, the mind, emotion, and our intuition. They're kind of like anchors, and they're always with you. So this is a very simple mindfulness check. We were in that for about 5 minutes. Again, you can do this for 20 minutes. You can do this for 20 seconds, but I invite you to use it. So we want to make self-care our top priority. Strategy number 3, seek clarity. This is a very practical tool. It's very necessary, and you have full permission. I promise you, if you grant yourself permission to seek clarity, you're going to navigate what's ahead with even more ease. When in doubt, ask. Request information of your manager, of your leader, of each other. Be very, very clear about what is expected of you. And I'm talking now about who you are as a professional being. Has my role changed? Has my job changed? Have modes of evaluation changed, especially as you're beginning to transition into your workplace? Be very clear about expectations, because in some ways they've changed. Be very clear with your organization about what safety procedures have been implemented to keep you safe, physically safe. Create and plan your own safety procedures. These are the ways in which I'm going to proactively stay safe in my workplace. Expect from your leaders and your managers and your colleagues honesty and transparency. This is critical right now. And I expect this of my leader. And be at ease with the answer, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. There's a reason for all of this that I'll make clear in a moment. I want to take a brief aside. If you lead or manage, please remember that knowledge is empowering. It will put others at ease. It is a natural stress reliever. If you are honest and transparent with me and you're my leader or my team manager, you will get more of me because it puts me at ease the more that I know. Transparency is valued by all of us. If you tell me that you don't know the answer to something, I value and respect that because it shows me that you are a person of integrity, of empathy, of compassion, and of humility, because there's a lot that we don't know, including our managers and our leaders. You will win the best efforts, the best work of your team if you are honest and open with them. This slide is applicable to everyone because for everyone else here, I want you to know that you should expect this of your leaders. Seek clarity. Muster the courage and the bravery that is required when you need to ask a question. It is one of the ways in which you are going to replenish your surge capacity. Because when we don't know, when we have questions, when we sense that someone is not being honest and transparent with us, when there's too much uncertainty, we will have stress response kick in. And there's already enough to be stressful about. You're going to notice that in workplace environments, people are starting to talk to each other very differently. You might be noticing this already. We're much more direct. We're not beating around the bush anymore. We are getting things done. Things that may have taken 7 months are getting done now in 2 weeks. We are operating at a very different level, even in our communication. Seek clarity for your own sanity. This might be one of the most important slides in the deck. It's reminding us of the significance of social support right now, as related to what is called the crisis of loneliness, deemed by Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was our former Surgeon General. You might see him. He's been on TV quite a bit lately, talking about the COVID crisis. Prior to all of this, he published his study and actually subsequently a book on the crisis of loneliness, not only in our culture, but mostly in the workplace, and the significant toll that it takes on who we are professionally. So we want to make sure that we're nurturing connections and we're supporting connections as we move forward. And it might sound really strange for me to say that because presently so many of us are working remotely. So whether you're back in your workplace or not, it's still important to really hold on to the significance of social support as it relates to your workplace, as it relates to your colleagues. So here's what we know that's kind of exciting about what makes people thrive at their jobs, right? What makes an individual feel that they have a high degree of well-being when it relates to their professional lives? Well-being as a professional is directly linked to the degree to which you feel that you are supported by your relationships. We often think that relationships are just sort of a byproduct of what it means to work because most of us are working with other people, as opposed to being critically essential to job performance, to job effectiveness, to like surpassing my expectations, to having stellar evaluations. I will work harder, I will work wiser, I will really, really bring it if I feel relationally supported by my colleagues, by my manager, by my leader. So there are 4 aspects of social support that we really have to be mindful about. The emotional, what's called the instrumental, the informative, and the appreciative. So the emotional relates to how do we care for and about each other in the workplace? And you know your workplace culture enough to know how you were doing that, back then. But this is now. And how have you managed to take care of each other in this new environment, this remote environment? And moving forward, when our workplace is likely going to look different and operate different, how will we care for each other? Instrumental social support refers to how we help and assist each other in the actual doing of our jobs. You might have discovered that you've had to pitch in ways that you haven't had to before, that you might have been called into a very different kind of position in your company, in your organization, because of the crisis we're enduring. And you may have discovered the need for instrumental support, which helps you and assists you in doing whatever it is that you need to do to support your company. Informative social support is the knowledge that we share with each other. So when a leader is sharing about the status of the organization in the midst of crisis in an open and in a transparent way, that leader is creating a sense of relational social support. And the leader might not realize, but this contributes to the well-being, the professional well-being of everyone in the organization in very profound ways. And number 4 might be the most important on the slide, and that is the appreciative nature of social support. We see the way in which a child will light up when we say, "You've done a good job," when we clap because they've gotten up off the floor after falling, when we applaud them for their efforts. We should never imagine that that need to feel confirmed, that need for appreciation and approval and significance goes away, because it doesn't. And so sometimes, maybe you're on a Zoom call and one of your team members really brought it. And after the meeting's over, you pick up the phone and give her a call and you say, "You were outstanding." Or, "I really benefited from that insight that you had." Or a quick text that said, "You rocked it today." These small gestures are incredibly important right now. So take care of each other. Build up social support in your workplace culture right now in really creative, innovative ways. Start thinking about what this is going to look like when you return to your workspace, knowing that it's absolutely critical to well-being. So how does this all translate? Really simply, right? You can ask a colleague, you may not use these exact words, but how can I best care for you? Do you need anything from me? How can I best help or support you in what you're doing so that you can do it even better? What information can I share with you that might be really helpful, that might bring your stress level down? And then asking yourself, how can I take really brief moments throughout my day to show appreciation or to acknowledge someone's significance? Because the absence of just one person in an organization changes an organization in big and small ways. Things are different without that person and without that person's contribution. So appreciation is critical, and it's critical right now. It often might even feel shocking to the person who's receiving the appreciation, because again, we've had our heads down. We are working really hard. We're just putting one foot in front of the other to manage this weird place we're in. And so the moment of appreciation might sound like a loud voice in a dark storm, or feel like a bright light in a dark storm. And we just really take that in. So really get serious about this idea of social support. And I want you to remember something, and this comes out of Dr. Vivek Murthy's work. This is game-changing. Hold this in your mind. The best predictor of professional success is professional well-being. The sense that I am well at work. The best predictor of workplace well-being is the connections that are forged and sustained. It's relational. It's not about the work itself. It's relational. We spend the majority of our time at work or working. Remotely or in person, we need each other. That doesn't change. It does not change. Probably the most frightening and alarming aspect of Dr. Murthy's work is his scholarship on what isolation, loneliness, lack of meaningful relationship, workplace relationship, actually does to us physically, mentally, emotionally. He ran a series in Harvard Business Review. I believe it was a series of 7 articles that predated his book that addressed what he called the crisis of loneliness in workplace cultures. And he said, the individual that arrives to work and feels disconnected from his or her colleagues, the impact that that disconnection, that lack of social support has on that individual's physical being is equivalent to the smoking of 15 cigarettes per day. That it has an impact on our cardiovascular system, that it has an impact on our immunity, that it has an impact on our central nervous system. It definitely has an impact on our level of stress. I could go on and on. You can look in his book, or you can go back to that series if you just Google the words workplace loneliness, Harvard Business Review. You'll see the detrimental impact that lack of connection has on who we are related to our workplace. Deeply impacts our mental health. So, although this is content that is really important, regardless of what time and history we're in related to the work we do, it is especially relevant now. Because knowing all of this, trusting that this data is true, means that we have to get a little bit more creative and innovative. And we have to get really serious, especially if we're planning on a return to the workplace. We have to get serious about how we're going to manage this really essential piece of relational well-being. So just a couple of things that you can start doing immediately. Check in on your colleagues in really meaningful ways. Hey, how are you doing? Isn't enough unless you really mean it and you really want to hear. When I'm asking you, how are you doing? In the context of a global pandemic, I mean it. Tell me. Practice presence when you ask such a question, when you check in. Practice deep listening. Practice empathy. These things are another webinar, but you know enough about these things to know, hey, I should not ask you about your well-being if I'm thinking about what I had for dinner last night, or I'm worried about my children returning to school tomorrow. Stay present. It makes a difference. People feel that. Listen for what's not being said. Because when you tell me you're okay and you tell me you're fine, it might be that I can see in your face, even over Zoom, that your face, your body language, the sound of your voice is telling me something very different. often what's not being said is far more important and interesting and meaningful, and certainly more authentic than what's actually being spoken. Check in on each other. Pay a special attention to those individuals in your life, your colleagues who seem particularly agitated, highly triggered, and those who seem to be more withdrawn. And this is also true. Apply all of this to your personal life and your family life as well. I realized that someone that I hear from very regularly, it was noticeable to me just yesterday, you know, I haven't heard from him in a while. I was sensing the withdrawal. So I did a check-in, like, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. Are you okay? And he wasn't. But I had to check in. It had to be on my radar. I had to get really mindful about it. Who haven't I heard from? Who's kind of dropped off the radar here? Checking in. Be creative with your check-ins, and you're connecting, transparent, and be very realistic. In other words, you can name it. You know what? These are troubling times, and we need to get really, really intentional about checking in on each other. Like, be that transparent about it. I want you to know that I called you today because I want to know how you're doing, and I want to know how you're really doing. Or I sense you're struggling and I just want to know, maybe I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. Or I feel like I want to extend a hand to help. How can I help? What do you need? And mean it. We've been really creative at Studio B. We've implemented 2 practices that have been really valuable. Every morning at 9 a.m. we have what's called our morning stand-up, where we check in for 15 minutes. We gather as a team, and we're each responsible for saying what we're up to today, what we're going to be working on, what we accomplished the day before, and where we're feeling stuck, what's in the way. And the other thing that we implemented was a monthly roundup. And the roundup is where we gather together once a month, and it's sort of like we just put it out in the circle. This is what's going on. This is the shit show that's my life right now. And we just put it out there. And it feels good to have that space, even if it's a virtual space. We started implementing another strategy from another colleague who recommended that when a meeting is starting to go stale or the very beginning seems a little awkward, our colleague Rachel will come in and say, hey, let's just take a quick check-in through high-low. What was your high today? What was your low? And it's a really interesting way to get to know people, because oftentimes my high and my low has nothing to do with work and everything to do with things that are going on in my life, but are spilling over and into my work. Dr. Murthy recommended something that he implemented with his team, where during team meetings, at the beginning of team meetings, one person would volunteer to do a very brief slideshow. And it was sort of like, I want you to get to know me through photographs only. Nothing is spoken, right? And it's just a way to check in. Another thing we do at Studio B before most of our meetings is we take a mindful 3 minutes. We literally set the timer and we sit quietly for 3 minutes, and it just brings us all together because we're working remotely, and gives us this sense of staying connected. Very briefly before we end, I just want to remind you of something. In our last webinar together, I talked to you about the kinds of things that are really shaking us up right now. If you didn't have a chance, you can go back and look at that video if you weren't with us, because it's really important content to know why it is that we as human beings are feeling really vulnerable and triggered right now and stressed out. It's because so many of us are worried about our safety. So many of us are in upheaval because nothing feels certain. Many of us are questioning our ability to be autonomous and independent because there's a lot of restraints on us right now. Just wear a mask for a couple hours a day and you feel your autonomy getting threatened. Many of us are worried about our connections, our relationships. Some of us have been apart from loved ones now for a long time. And many of us just feel like, what the heck's going on here? It feels so unfair that my child can't return to school, or it feels unfair that I didn't get to watch my child walk across the stage for graduation in the spring. So in our safety, our certainty, our autonomy, our relatedness, our sense of fairness, dignity, respect, when those are upset, we get upset. So know your neighbors, know your colleagues, and know that when they seem kind of off, run yourself through these letters, through the acronym, and say, this is the SCARF acronym, by the way. And you get a fuller sense of what might be going on, and apply this to yourself as well, as you get to know yourself better, as we continue to navigate this tricky territory. So I want to leave you with one final tool, because you'll remember that at the beginning, I mentioned how important it is to meet the stress that's here. It's here. It is here. Some days are better than others, but it's here. To meet it mindfully, with a lot of awareness, and with a lot of kindness. Real simple strategy. You can walk yourself through this in 30 seconds, or you can really take your time with it. It's called the self-compassion break. It comes from the work of doctors Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer, who study the science of self-compassion. Yes, there's a science to it. So you're really struggling. You're really feeling challenged. You're really feeling keyed up and triggered. Step one, recognize that. And maybe you say, okay, this is hard. Or, whoa, I'm really challenged right now. Or it could be, this sucks. Or it can be, I'm really suffering right now. Step one. Step two, and I know that there are others out there on this planet that are suffering in the same way right now, or in a similar way. And this is not to diminish my suffering, but this is to remind myself that I belong to a common humanity, and I am not alone in being frantic about returning to work, or having my kids go back to school, or not go back to school, or whatever it is. So this is hard. I'm not alone. I'm connected to an entire planet of people who right now are out of their minds with worry. So just be kind. Give yourself a break. You deserve it. You need it. This is how you would treat someone else who is suffering or challenged. You'd acknowledge that, yeah, it's hard. Yeah, you are not alone. I'm right here. And you would be exceptionally kind. You treat a child this way. Turn that same kind of energy onto yourself and watch yourself transform in reference to, in relationship to the things that stress you out. This is a tried and true method. Again, you can use it in the moment, or you can take it into a quiet meditative period, reflecting on what's hard, taking a moment to expand out and connect to all of the people on the planet that are feeling similarly, and then just, okay, I have permission. I'm giving myself permission to be kind. So reframe. Take exceptional care of yourself. Seek clarity. You deserve that. It'll bring stress level down. Do not forget the importance of social support right now. You need each other. And be mindful about your stress and meet it with kindness. This is how we will navigate the way forward. Thank you for being here with me today, with us here today, here at Studio B. And I'm here. I'll hang out if there are any questions. I know we've come to the end of this very fast hour.
That did go by fast. Thank you, Christine.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I hope it was helpful, and it's just so timely for a lot of different reasons. We might not be going back, but maybe our kids are. Or we're certainly entering into a new phase of this. It just feels this way as fall is approaching, that we're sort of coming around another bend of the path, and we're not quite sure. We can be certain of the uncertainty. Anything you need, please reach out to us.
Yes, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next month.
Okay. Take good care. Christine.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you so much,
Bye.
Christine. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you for coming.